Down 1-0 in the second half, Hunter Sports High needed to increase its tempo to be a chance. It came via a free kick. A rare mistake from David Tadgic, giving Ryan Clark his team's first. Lambton hit back minutes later, a speculator of a cross finding Josh Piddington and then the net. Hunter Sports High again lifted, Aaron McLaughlin higher than anyone else. The 2-2 margin didn't last long, Piddington scoring his second, but minutes later a penalty in the box gave Hunter Sports High's Jared Johnson a simple chance at equalising. The game moved into extra time and Hunter Sports High had the best chances. A fingertip saved Lambton the first time and selfish play killed this opportunity for their opposition. But at the end of the match, the players stepped up for the dreaded penalty shootout. David Tadgic saving more than the day. His 3-save effort seeing Lambton make the semi-finals and avenging last year's loss to their rivals in similar circumstances. Colin Robinson, NBN News.
Former nurse Cheryl Freeman got these so-called meningococcal vaccines through the post, paying as little as $7.70 for a course. It's claimed they are an alternative to the orthodox vaccine, a homeopathic way of protecting against the deadly meningococcal disease.
It is utter nonsense that has no place in the year 2002 where you are trying to manage infectious diseases. It's just no place.
These remedies have no proven preventative properties, prompting medical authorities to issue a public warning.
It's important in labelling any therapeutic product to label it correctly and truthfully, and to put vaccine on a product that is not a vaccine, it's just not being truthful and not being fair to the public who might trust it.
Government regulators are also concerned by misleading labelling.
When they start to make claims about serious illnesses, they are required to be registered with us, and it's our belief that some of these products may be being supplied outside the law.
The Therapeutic Goods Administration has now asked the South Australian manufacturer to withdraw the product. The federal government this week committed itself to establishing a mass immunisation program next year using the conventional vaccine.
It's understandable that when there's something which has caused a lot of public concern that people will look for answers wherever they can find them, but unfortunately homeopathic vaccines are no answer to this problem.
Tanny Carlisle, NBN News.
friendly game of touch football with HMS Nottingham's rugby team kicked off night's training today, and while there were plenty of sailors present, there were obviously no Wendells.
Mate, I didn't study him too close, but I don't know if we'll be recruiting any of those men, no.
The crew members, however, did enjoy getting a close-up look at Andrew Johns, even agreeing with the Australian belief that he is the world's best player.
I wouldn't argue with that, I don't think. I think you'd have to be a fool to argue with that, wouldn't you? That's like playing, football against David Beckham, isn't it? Or soccer, you call it over here.
While the Knights are understandably happy to still be playing alongside their skipper, he's not the only focus this week, with both Danny Badiris and Robbie O'Davis training well and slated to return from injury. The veteran fullback considers himself a definite, but he knows he'll have to impress after watching his replacement, Kurt Gidley.
Probably got to live up to his little bit of a reputation at the fullback now, because he's adding a lot of enthusiasm, so hopefully I can do the same.
The Knights leave for Aussie Stadium on Saturday. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
This is the site of the proposed Hunter Mall markets. Disability groups say the area is totally unacceptable and the market should be moved closer to the shops, on flat ground.
The proposed site, as you can see, is extremely hilly. It's that hilly that it contravenes the Australian standards of a 1 in 14. We did a bit of a test here today and it actually ended up being 1 in 8, which is extremely steep.
Newcastle Council says it will take this into consideration before making its decision. Meantime, around 50 people gathered at the Gallipoli Legion Club to look at establishing a second seniors association in the region. With 230,000 members Australia-wide, the organisation is a force to be reckoned with. As well as being a social club, its members also lobby governments on issues such as healthcare and mature age employment.
We are faced with some real challenges for the next 10 or 20 years, a diminishing workforce, more people who are able to take advantage of retirement, also people who will want to move in and out of the workforce.
Tanny Carlisle, NBN News.
No sooner did the WNBA season wrap up, but Team USA was packed into a plane and jetted to Australia to prepare for the World Championships. Tonight's training session at the Broadmeadow Basketball Stadium was the first time all 12 players had been together this year, something coach Van Chancellor is all too aware of.
We have not worked very much together, and that's a concern, and the rest of the world's got much better. There's so many good teams in the world today. You have to play very, very good.
Among those rating a special mention, the Opals, and you get the impression the USA coach will be among those watching the matchup between Lisa Leslie and Australia's Lauren Jackson with interest.
I think that Lauren Jackson and Lisa Leslie are two of the great players in the world today. If I was going to rate the top 10 players, both of them would be in that top 10.
The Americans begin the World Challenge event against Brazil tomorrow night, while Australia's first opponent, France, also arrive today. Unlike its rivals, the European champions have had plenty of time to prepare. A recent series against Belgium, Japan and China showing they've got plenty of form on the board.
We're doing okay. We have a lot of stuff to do still. In defense we have to be tougher, I think, in defense and still work on some little details in offense. But we do very well.
The tournament begins tomorrow night at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
For Hamilton coach John Jenkins, this grand final has been a long time coming. For Wanderers mentor Alan Barker, playing football at this time of year is all too familiar. Meeting on neutral ground today, by kick-off tomorrow, neither side will be giving an inch at the Gardens.
People keep saying it's just another game. Well, it's not. It's a special game. The occasion creates its own pressure.
Wanderers should know tomorrow marks their third successive grand final appearance. For Hamilton, it's their first since 1990.
It probably has helped in terms of enthusiasm and sort of desire to keep the momentum going at training over the last couple of weeks.
Hawks veteran Mick Curry was in that last successful Hamilton side. He has the chance to retire in fairy tale fashion.
Well, I reckon if we win the grand final tomorrow, Wales will probably do a handstand over the goalpost, but we'll see.
Both sides scored a win each in the regular season, while Hamilton got the money in the major semi-final, but no result has been by more than 7 points. It's hard to see much separating them tomorrow either.
On the results of the last few weeks, we'd have to be the underdogs.
In terms of the major semi, the result was pleasing in the scoreline, but, there are facets of our play that we want to improve.
Meanwhile, tonight, the women's decider will be played under lights at Townsend Oval between Merewether and Hamilton.
The Knights are on the verge of obtaining their first minor premiership. They'll have to wait until Sunday 3 p.m. to play the Dragons at Aussie Stadium, which is the last game of the round. But tonight could go a long way to wrapping it up for the team. There'll be 2 games played tonight, the Warriors v the Tigers at Ericsson Stadium and also the Broncos v the Bulldogs at the Showground. Now, if the Warriors and the Broncos lose, the Knights will instantly take the minor premiership. Now, it's also interesting, the last time the Knights were in line-up for the minor premiership was in '98, the year following a grand final win. Now, the same has happened this year. In '98, they were equal minor premiers with the Broncos, but they came second on for and against. Now, hopefully this year the boys will go a step further. When you look at this year's league ladder, the teams that were widely agreed wouldn't perform this year didn't, as in the Rabbitohs, Panthers, Cowboys and Tigers. And the top 8 is made up of teams that we all expected to perform, except for one, the Eagles. Peter Sharp has done an outstanding job with the team. They've been this year's best performers, considering the tumultuous position that they were in the start of the year. Anyway, on to the final round, and there's 2 games being played tonight. I'm tipping the Warriors and the Bulldogs both to win at home. On Saturday, there's 3 games. The first is a classic battle for the top 8 between the Raiders and the Storm, both on 23 points. I'm going for the Raiders. Roosters over the Sharks and the Eels to beat the Cowboys. And on Sunday, the Eagles to win and a full-strength Knights line-up to take out the minor premiership. Good luck with your tips. I'll see you next week.
It was a scene more akin to a Hollywood movie. A Ford Telstar, driven by a 20-year-old Balmoral man, ploughed through the Rathmines Community Hall early last night. The car was being driven along Dorrington Road toward the lake when it continued through the T-intersection with Stilling Street. It became airborne, careering into the hall's front doors and exiting through the back of the building, narrowly missing people inside.
At the time, when he drove through the hall, there was a number of people using the hall for a rehearsal of a play, and thankfully none of those were injured.
9 members of the Catalina Players were trying on choir outfits before rehearsal, and a member of the public was purchasing a ticket to their show when theatre group director Helen Bristow says there was an explosion and fireball.
Some of us were aware that debris was flying but didn't know what that was coming from, and some of it was from the car and some of it was from the hall itself.
No one actually saw the car career through the building, but the group believes trying on the outfits probably saved their lives.
Had we not been held back by doing this, we would have been in the direct line of that.
Lake Macquarie Council General Manager Ken Holt today surveyed the damage and says the community will be affected until the hall is repaired.
We're trying to organise alternative accommodation for the groups that use this hall because it is such a well-used hall.
Members of the Catalina Players are still coming to terms with their ordeal, but they have vowed to return to the stage to complete the last 2 performances of their production.
They will go on because we can't finish on tragedy.
Police are yet to release the name of the dead man. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Pacific Highway traffic was plunged into chaos early this morning. This southbound semi-trailer carrying a load of potting mix left the road just minutes from the Karua township and ploughed into a large tree. The force of the impact separated the cabin of the rig from the prime mover and sent it skidding along the roadway. Part of the tree was also felled by the impact and almost hit several vehicles when it crashed down across both lanes of the highway. A second southbound truck managed to avoid the fallen timber. Not so lucky, a Great Lakes oyster farmer who was taking his first load of new season Wallace River oysters to the Sydney seafood market. The front of his ute damaged when it hit the downed limb. Police say the 35-year-old truck driver from Mulloway, north of Coffs Harbour, was treated by ambulance paramedics flown to the scene by the Hunter Region Westpac Rescue helicopter, but died before he could be airlifted to Newcastle. Crash investigation officers are continuing inquiries to establish the exact cause of the accident. Gary Blair, NBN News.
When Danny Badiris injured his wrist against the Eagles 3 weeks ago, it was thought the Australian hooker would only miss one match. Today, he was ruled out of Sunday's game against the Dragons, making it 3 matches on the sideline and prompting him to seek further medical opinion from a Sydney specialist. His loss means Bill Peden will again fill in at number 9, with Daniel Abraham into the starting side and Julian Bailey thought to be the man who comes onto the bench. The exact lineup is to be finalised at tomorrow's training run in Sydney. For the Dragons, Sunday's game plan is simple.
Yeah, win.
If they don't, their season is over and quite possibly Farah's job with it. Timmins' withdrawal today not making things any easier and making it 4 regular first graders now out for the Dragons.
Once again, it's the most vulnerable who appear to have been targeted. A 78-year-old female patient suffering a serious blood condition and a male patient with terminal cancer say they were sexually assaulted while being treated at the Mater Hospital. A third female patient claims she was indecently assaulted. Before 2 of the patients died from their illnesses, they told their families what happened. They notified police a month ago amid intense media coverage over the alleged rape and bashing of a 50-year-old cancer patient. Police facing high odds of ever catching anyone.
Well, the difficulties that are presented, of course, that we don't have a complainant to speak to. The families can be rest assured that we are certainly including it in our operation that's running at the moment.
The first alleged assault occurred in 1985. Then, in 1991, an elderly female patient claims she was sexually assaulted. Then, a nurse says the same thing happened to her a year later. In the year 2000, a male cancer patient said he was also sexually assaulted. Then there were the incidents last month involving Jane, the cancer patient, and a woman who scared away a peeping Tom.
Even in the early stages of this investigation, there are no trends that are showing that we might be dealing with one person.
In response, the Mater has instigated tough new security measures. Meantime, distinguished Bankstown Police Chief Peter Parsons has just been named as the Hunter's new top cop. Vanessa Trezise, NBN News.
It was time for a toast today as former workers gathered near the remains of the steelworks. 1,500 employees lost their jobs 3 years ago, but some believe we may never know the true cost of the closure.
Mate, you'll never know that because some of them won't tell you. You know, men have this thing where big boys don't cry and don't tell secrets, but there's a lot of them still out of work, yeah.
Some, though, have been luckier than others.
No, I transferred straight to the bar mill and one still. Now continue straight on, never stop.
Today's reunion was for everyone, but the men say they rarely see their old managers.
They always used to talk to me about there was no them and us, but it amazes me that there's us here, but none of them.
Paul Lobb, NBN News. Of the 10 RAF reserve squadrons in Australia, the City of Newcastle Squadron at Williamtown has been voted the most efficient and effective by the Air Force Association. The 220 members paraded for proud family and friends today before being inspected by Air Force Chief Air Marshal Angus Houston. The reserves represent all facets of Air Force life.
Air traffic control, catering, air movements type of work, clerks. We have just about every employment stream you can think of is represented in the RAF Reserve.
Just as the trophy bears the wings of an eagle, 4 of Williamtown's reserve pilots spread their wings in the Hawk fighter trainer jets with a formation flyover.
Thanks, Jim. Well, it's an exciting time of the year for rugby league, and with the first week of the semi-finals, picking a winner is always pretty tough, and this year's no different. There's a mounting injury toll posing a problem for a few of the teams, and also a massive home ground advantage really means you have to put that factor into calculations to pick a winner. But one team a lot of the fans are predicting big things from in the next 4 weeks are the Roosters, and I agree. They've been in super impressive form as of late, and they are the best defensive team in the competition. But most importantly, their captain Freddie Fittler has shown the best form of his career, and I caught up with him during the week. You really enjoyed this year. Your football's been outstanding. The team's performing well, looking trim as well. You're looking fit. Everything going good?
Mate, good year. Enjoying life. Win football games always makes life easy, and to be doing it in the shape that we've been doing the last couple of weeks makes it a joy to be alive, Chief.
Oh, looking at all the other teams, who do you think will be there against the Roosters?
I think it's hard to go past Newcastle. They got the runs on the board. Most of their players now been to a couple of grand finals, and I think Brisbane are going to be hard to beat in the semis as well. They haven't been in the best of form lately, but they've just got too many big game players to be going shy this time of year.
Well, with the Freddie Fittler factor in mind and the home ground advantage, I'm going with the Roosters. For the rest, I'm tipping wins from the Broncos, Knights and the Warriors.
The colourful costumes of the students only helped to enhance the party atmosphere at Belmont North Public School today. Officially, the gathering was a way for the school to thank parents who fundraised to help build a covered outdoor learning area for students.
And we look at ourselves as part of a triangle of partnership of education with the community, with the students and with parents, and we all need to depend on each other to be successful.
Also showing off their talents to visiting parents was the school's all-boy dance troupe. And many years of fundraising finally came to an end for supporters of the Lakeside Special School. The school today showed off its new wheelchair access bus worth $69,000. The bus will be used to transport the school's 8 wheelchair-bound students to events and excursions. Meanwhile, Newcastle High School marked Education Week by opening a new entrance gateway. The new centenary gates are part of the school's upcoming centenary celebrations. Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
When Billy Peden made his first grade debut against the Gold Coast in 1994, the 24-year-old late starter never dreamed of being around for many years to come, let alone 2 premierships.
No, actually when I first got here I didn't think I'd be here longer than a year, so it's been a bit of a bonus to be, probably to be in my 9th season here, so yeah, bonus.
Another is his position as the Knights club captain and the special place he's earned in the hearts of fans and teammates alike.
Well, he epitomises what Newcastle's all about. He's a hard-working man and just deserves everything he gets.
If Joe is our brain, he's certainly our heart and soul, that's for sure.
I think that's just a nice term someone come up with someday. It's, I'm pretty sure blokes like Johnsy and Chief have been that over the years, so I'm happy to leave them with it.
Danny Badiris, meanwhile, is just happy to be back. Forced to watch the Dragons from the sideline at the weekend, he's determined this Saturday's game will be far different.
Obviously, you saw the way we trained today. We had a really sharp session, and the boys are really keen. And there's a few tense characters around, so everyone's ready to go for Saturday night.
Colin Baldwin, NBN News. The first half of the boys' final was a tale of 2 keepers, Lambton's Daniel Taddick and Bosley Park's Paul Argyropoulos, while the woodwork also played its part in keeping the side scoreless. More human brilliance followed after the break, while the rain didn't make life any easier for the attackers. Regular time ended 0-0. The game went to golden goal extra time, and 2 minutes in it was the Sydney-siders who found the breakthrough, Taddick having no answer to what was basically a 2-on-1, Dean Zachariah the eventual scorer. Lambton thanked its hometown support after a great season, while the winners celebrated with a case of grass burn. The girls' final was equally hard fought, with McKellar's Natalie Moore finding the space late in the second half to slot home the winner, Mount View Cessnock finishing as runners-up from the 347 teams which kicked off the girls' trophy. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Within seconds, the freeway was brought to a standstill. Traffic was backed up for kilometres after 5 cars and 2 trucks crashed into one another. The chain reaction began just after midday as the vehicles merged into one lane because of roadworks near Dora Creek.
We don't know the exact causes yet, but there's about 4 or 5 cars in a row which have collided in the rear of each other.
It's thought this light truck suddenly merged into the right lane and then slammed into the back of the semi-trailer. Drivers of the remaining vehicles say it happened so quickly they had nowhere else to go. A medical team was flown down from Newcastle together with ambulance crews to treat the 2 men in the light truck who were seriously injured.
The dashboard had actually collapsed on them. Both patients were conscious at the time. Unfortunately, one patient passed away before we got them out of the vehicle.
The other man, in his early 30s, was airlifted to John Hunter Hospital with multiple injuries. Fortunately, the drivers and passengers in the remaining vehicles escaped injury. Northbound lanes were closed for several hours.
It is unfortunate being a Friday afternoon, but it did not occur due to the normal heavy traffic flow we get coming from Sydney. It's just an accident that happened.
Lyndall Derrick, NBN News.
The Knights have rarely looked forward to a game more than this, but you can understand the anxiety felt by Danny Badiris. Suffering a prolonged absence with that wrist injury, the Test rake and rep player of the year knows he'll be back amongst it against the Dragons.
The best thing about it will be for the spectators, I suppose, will be the clash of the forwards and our two pretty big packs, and pretty skillful, so it'll be a good contest.
While the Knights have already circled a grand final date in for early October, they proved last night they're a team for all seasons, with the launch of a calendar for next year. Danny Badiris, now Mr. January 2003. The entire playing roster for this season features in the calendar that got the big thumbs up from players and supporters alike. After weeks of speculation, a groin injury has ended Robbie O'Davis's season, but Mr. September came under plenty of scrutiny last night as well. The NBN Telethon will be a major beneficiary from sales.
They arrived without warning and within moments had surrounded the city, targeting Newcastle's hotspots on foot, by patrol car and even from the air. The massive police presence was all in the name of Operation Viking.
It's sending out a clear message that people can feel safe to walk the streets and have a good night out without being assaulted.
More than 100 traffic infringement notices were issued, knife searches carried out, and drug detection dogs were being led inside and outside of licensed premises. The dogs successful in locating cannabis, ecstasy and amphetamines.
We've picked up small amounts of cannabis and various tablets and forms of drugs.
And it was not just drugs being targeted, it was also alcohol-related antisocial behaviour. Police say last night's swoop is only a taste of more blitzes to come.
I've been given an absolute guarantee by the Deputy Commissioner and the Commissioner that we will get the resources we need to continue with these operations until we get control.
But it remains to be seen whether the operation will have any impact in the long term in reducing crime. Lyndall Derrick, NBN News.
Spinning Hill storming home in its first run back from a spell to upstage Bella Spree. At Rose Hill, it was anyone's race in the finish of the Theo Marks Stakes. Defier just getting home on the line and getting the cash ahead of Phoenix Park. After beating a big spending Parramatta yesterday 1-0, United could afford to splash around today. The effort made even greater given the already long list of injured.
You know, we've had Shrip, Apprentice, Bingley, Zorosic, Wilson, Joel Griffiths all sitting in the stand.
Outside of the long-term problems, Captain Matt Bingley and Chris Zorosic will miss at least the first 2 weeks, while Mark Wilson is also unavailable. Joel Griffiths isn't as bad, but is still racing the clock to be fit for Friday night.
The last thing that we need now is to rush Joel back early, break down, and then lose him for another 2 or 3 weeks.
Cleared of a break, a foot injury is troubling the striker, who has played just one 90-minute match in the pre-season. The team to play South Melbourne will be announced on Wednesday, with the coach just as keen to get into the new season.
If we don't win, it won't be for the case of us not preparing correctly, you know. But we've got to stay positive. I believe that, you know, we've got a side here that's capable of achieving again and hopefully going one step further than last year.
Meanwhile, South Melbourne are sorting out some problems of their own with a nasty end to its pre-season. As reported earlier, a trial match against a local Melbourne team turned violent, with rival fans clashing also with police. The charity game was designed to raise money for 2 slain police officers.
Around 170 police from Sydney and Newcastle stormed the city on Friday night in a surprise blitz called Operation Viking, a move welcomed by some business owners.
It was an excellent surprise.
Police say the majority of people out were well behaved. The Polair helicopter was used in pursuit of one man who was allegedly driving under the influence of drugs. But all up, just 33 arrests were made.
It wasn't about locking people up for tiny little bits of marijuana or small amounts of drugs. It was sending a message out there.
But the operation has also been labelled a pre-election stunt.
I don't care what the motives might or might not be. All I care about is getting the resources and being able to go ahead and do the job the way that it needs to be done.
If it's an election PR stunt, we need elections every week.
The police have also defended criticism that the operation was a waste of taxpayers' money. The Newcastle commander says it was actually cost-effective, involving minimal hours of overtime. Meanwhile, police have announced the Swansea Police Station has extended its operating hours and increased its number of officers.
Now we have mobile patrols with additional resources that can go for anywhere from 20 hours a day to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And Morisset is now likely to be permanently manned 24 hours a day following the success of a 3-month trial. Lyndall Derrick, NBN News.
It's a right point break, which I love to surf. It's always surf on the Gold Coast, so just got to get used to the cold water and it should go well.
Hunter Region Westpac Rescue Helicopter has led local involvement in the Excalibur search. Initially called out overnight to find a distress beacon, they were recalled to the search area today after a passing ship rescued 2 survivors from the yacht.
They confirmed that 4 other people were in life jackets and apparently in the water, so hence the search this morning.
The helicopter was ready for any eventuality. A rescue crewman dressed in a wetsuit and 2 ambulance paramedics on board to begin treatment when survivors were located. However, their medical skills weren't needed on today's first mission.
No, we're basically in the aircraft just spotting. We've picked up where the yacht was, directed the water police into that area, and then just checked out all the stuff that is in the water to make sure that there's no one in amongst it, and completed the search pattern.
Among those joining the air search, Sydney's Child Flight Helicopter called to the Broadmeadow base to ferry a life raft to the search when Angel 1 was tasked to take 3 police divers from Williamtown to the upturned Excalibur. On the water, 2 vessels from Port Stephens have put to sea for the search. Police launch Intrepid and the Coastal Patrol rescue craft Daniel Thane joining the massive air and sea operation.
We have 6 ships, 3 police launches, 8 helicopters and 3 fixed-wing aircraft searching the area.
Back on land, Port Stephens Coastal Patrol's radio base at Shoal Bay is a hive of activity. Personnel are assisting search headquarters in Canberra by monitoring radio transmissions and keeping track of search vessels. That job expected to continue tomorrow when the operation resumes. Gary Blair, NBN News. Williamtown RAAF base is the East Coast home of the Hawk lead-in fighter, 76 Squadron responsible for putting the nation's budding fast-jet military aviators through their introductory fighter training, which could be the stepping stone to flying an FA-18 Hornet or an F-111. It's now 2 years since the Hawk joined the RAAF flight line, and while the aircraft continues to have its potential developed, this year is seeing new milestones achieved. Fighter combat instructor Pat Barfield has taught his students about the Hawk's gunnery system in the simulator, but today several students became the first to actually fire over land at the Singleton Army weapons range. In a step forward for the Hawk program, the missions were declared a success after all rounds hit the target.
It's pinpoint accuracy, so the target we had today was 15 metres by 15 metres and all the bullets went on the target, so it is that accurate.
Another milestone awaits the 76 Squadron Hawks before the end of the year. A deployment to Townsville will see the aircraft's bombing capabilities put to the test.
We're going to be dropping Mark 82s, which are 500-pound high explosive bombs, and that'll be the first time they've been dropped in Australia off the Hawk 127.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Research and medical developments in the last 50 years have seen the populations of Western countries live longer. The costs associated with an increased demand on aged care services, as well as other government subsidies like pensions, is already having a major impact on European countries. Associate Professor Julie Biles, the Director of Hunter Ageing Research, says it's an unavoidable issue facing Australia.
But the news isn't all gloomy for Australia. We have about a 20-year window of opportunity to prepare for what some European countries are experiencing now.
We can look
almost like looking into the future, because we can see countries in Europe where they have a lot of older people, and how do they manage what works, what doesn't work.
Associate Professor Biles believes Australia can deal with it, saying all it will take is some clever planning to offset the financial cost of an ageing population. But it's unlikely the over 65s will ever become a burden. With Australia's birth rate declining, in the future they might be needed like never before.
When we think about people retiring at 60 or 65, we're going to need to rethink that, surprising as it may seem, because we won't have enough younger workers, and older people will need them to stay in the workforce.
Colin Robinson, NBN News.
At the start of the 2002 season, it was hard enough to pick a favourite to take out the premiership, and with just 4 teams left and 2 weeks to go, well, it's just no easier. Broncos, Warriors, Roosters and Sharks, they all have claims for the title, but it all starts tomorrow night when the Roosters take on the Broncos. Now, the Roosters undoubtedly have superior form going into the game. They beat the Broncos in round 22 at ANZ, and they really haven't looked back. They belted the Warriors and the Dragons, had back-to-back wins over the Sharks, and of course, they finished off Newcastle last week. And again, they get the advantage of playing at their home ground at Aussie Stadium. Now, having said all that, you put these two teams side by side on paper, well, the memories just come racing back of just how good this Bronco team really is. Now, you've got Lockyer, you can see there, Dakiri, Langer, Tallis, Webke, and a heap of other internationals provide experience that you just can't ignore. Now, they've had 1 week off, which I think will be a good thing for them, for a chance to be able to refocus on the big match. Then you go to Sunday, Telstra Stadium. It's the Warriors' turn to step up to the mark against the Sharks. Now, the atmosphere in New Zealand has been at fever pitch, and the Warriors, like the Broncos, have enjoyed a week off, soaking up the atmosphere. Now, the Sharks have a terrible record in the final series, but a totally different outfit this year under the coaching of Chris Anderson. He's really toughened them up. And Greg Bird, the young Novocastrian, well, he steps up to fill Matty Johns' shoes, and he's good enough to do the job too for the Sharks. Now, anyway, on to my tips for the 2 games. I've tipped the Warriors and also the Broncos to take out and be there in the grand final next week. Anyway, good luck for your tips. I'll see you next week.
The Welsh are known for their rich history of singing, and the South Wales Male Voice Choir is one of the country's best. They'll perform tomorrow night at Newcastle Civic Theatre to raise money for the Hunter Medical Research Institute. It comes after one of the choir's organisers sought help for the treatment of her bowel cancer from Professor Alan Spiegelman.
Oh, it's extremely pleasing, and both the recognition and the very important financial help that enables research such as this to go on.
The performance from 7:30 promises plenty of variety.
our regard, it just shows you that we regard Peter so highly that he was successful.
Back to soak up the soreness of a tough away trip to Sydney United, Newcastle hit the pool after its first loss for the season. The coach didn't need the cold light of day to make things any clearer.
Look, at the end of the day, we was beaten, and they probably deserved to win.
You certainly agreed when you saw the quality of Sydney's first goal through Brendan Santalab. Daniel Beltrame had a hand in stopping a second, but he couldn't hold out the inevitable, with Sydney grabbing another second-half goal to win comfortably. The loss made even more painful for Steve Eggleton, who copped a knock to his knee, but overall the result was tempered by some other remarkable finishes, including Perth's loss at home.
There's 3 teams that are undefeated at the moment, and that's it, and they're on 4 points. So we're 1 point off of the top, and that's at this stage of the season we'll settle for that.
Meanwhile, captain Matt Bingley continues his return from injury, but the skipper will have to make his return via the Youth League when he does prove his fitness. Michael Prentice has begun running but is still some weeks off a return. Jim Callanan, NBN News. From every state and territory, 20 teams from across the country have made the journey to Maitland's premier basketball facility to fight for the mantle of the country's best under-14 team. While Victorian sides generally dominate these championships, the host club is also represented. The Mustangs face a tough task, with all these sides having qualified through respective state championships in order to reach the event.
And they have a very, very tough start to the week. They're just playing North Adelaide in there at the moment, and they come up against the defending champions, Melbourne Tigers, this afternoon, straight after the opening ceremony.
Starting in 4 pools of 5 teams, matches continue all week, culminating in the final on Friday. And while the teams go hard at it, the local association seems to be winning its battle in proving more of these championships should head to Maitland.
Well, we have the facility now here. We've got four beautiful courts in there and a great facility, and now the people have the experience of running a tournament like this. I think we'll have a better show in the future of getting more of them.
After a month-long stopover, it was time today for HMAS Manoora and her 220 crew to wave goodbye and head back to sea. The former US naval ship, which originally left Newcastle in 1999 after refurbishment at Forjac's dockyard, had been back in the harbour for propeller maintenance. The lengthy visit provided the city with a substantial financial boost.
And we've been very fortunate to stay in Newcastle, and we engaged the community and, dare say, spent a lot of money up here, both privately and also for the ship.
For Commanding Officer Robert Morrison and his crew, it's been a busy past 18 months. Their major task was to enforce United Nations sanctions against Iraq in the Persian Gulf. Their next assignment is to enhance Manoora's helicopter support role in testing seas south of Tasmania.
We need to take on a Black Hawk, Army Black Hawk helicopter and a Navy Sea King. What we'll do with them is we'll put them through their limits and work what we can and can't do with the helicopters.
Newcastle's links with the Manoora and sister ship Canimbla are set to continue. The Australian Army's amphibious watercraft, soon to be built at ADI Newcastle, will be located on the forward decks of both vessels.
And they'll be faster and more efficient and modern technology. Very pleased to get them, and they're good for the ADF.
Gary Blair, NBN News.